Kinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with a real quick quote from Winston Churchill. He says, "You have enemies, good. That means you've stood up for something sometime in your life." I believe that in what I've seen lately in this administration, to be honest with you, we're out to make friends with everybody. I think it was mentioned earlier what's going on with the man who stole, the 29-year-old who basically decided he was going to take it upon himself to determine U.S. foreign policy, and is now being held by, I guess, the Russians. And there's this kind of carnival going on, and some people call him a hero. I tend to think he's a traitor, but that said, we don't really know, I think, where the administration stands on a lot of issues. The administration came in, they said they wanted a great reset with Russia. Unfortunately, I don't think Russia got that information. We disarmed our ability to defend ourselves against attacks to the chagrin of our allies, and the Russians responded by increasing their nuclear arsenal. The gentleman that spoke before me said something about yelling in terms of, we don't know where we want to go. Do we know who the enemy is? Do we know what exactly goals we need to achieve in Syria? And the answer is no, we don't. And the reason is because for the last 2 years, I have not heard this administration sell those goals to the American people. The leader of the free world is not the United States Congress. The leader of the free world is the President of the United States. Everywhere from 2009, where there was an uprising in Iran, utter silence, crickets on the side of the administration, to this situation in Syria where we saw Bashar al-Assad initially being challenged by people that wanted freedom from a dictatorship, and we got crickets from this administration. And now we've created ourselves, we put ourselves in a situation where the opposition does have al-Qaeda influence, and the opposition does have extremist influence. And the opposition now is much more muddled because there has not been American leadership. And sir, and I say this respectfully because I understand you're here as kind of the face of the administration. You're not the one necessarily making these decisions. That was made clear. But a big question I have is, where has the administration been in terms of selling this to the American people? And if we have been as active as you say, then how come we on this committee have talked to allies that have told us they're begging for United States leadership to bring these groups together? I won't necessarily out who's saying that, but I will say allies have talked to us and said, we need American leadership in this. So if you'd care to elaborate on exactly what we're doing and bringing allies together and taking a prime role in solving this situation, I'll give you a short opportunity to do that.
Well, let me just, I'm not sure I can respond to all the points you raised, Congressman.
I don't expect you to, no worries.
Let me simply say that we're engaged constantly. Secretary Kerry is on the phone and in the room with our allies in Europe. And
I understand he wants to bring the Russians together, and the Russians have made very clear that they have a very different interest, and if they come together and talk to us, it's probably to buy some time. It's not going to be because we're going to enlighten them with our philosophy, and they will want to have freedom in Syria. Go ahead.
So the United States, currently in the person of Secretary Kerry, is on a daily basis engaged with our friends and allies in Europe and across the Middle East on bringing them together around Syria and utilizing everybody's points of access to try to bring people to the table, as well as to organize effective humanitarian and other support to the Syrian opposition. So I don't know who you've heard from among our allies that says we're not leading this, but they certainly come to the meetings we convene, and there's a coordinated effort underway, and I think we're leading it. That's
the point. In Congress, I've been in Congress for 2.5 years now, and I've learned something, and that is there are plenty of meetings, but little action. And so bringing people to meetings, and again, I say this understanding you're not the one leading this, so this isn't a personal attack, but you're the face of the administration today. I think leading meetings isn't necessarily going to solve a situation where you have 90,000 people, vast majority of them innocent, that have lost their lives. It was also said earlier, America is sick and tired of war. I get it. America's tired. We are. As a military pilot and somebody that's been to a bunch of theaters in that capacity and still in the military, I can tell you we'd love all this war to go away. But we live in a moment in time right now where history in 50 or 100 years is going to judge what we did in this epic shift in what America and the world looks like. This is not the time to be fatigued. This is not the time for America to say, well, yeah, we get it, Iraq didn't go exactly as we had planned. Afghanistan's been a lot longer than we had planned. I feel like the administration's in a hurry to get out of Afghanistan on an artificial timeline, but that's a separate subject. This is not the moment where America can say, we don't have the luxury to say, we're a little fatigued, it's time to just move on. Because in 50 or 100 years, the history books that our kids and grandkids read is going to say, what did America do during this time when there was a monumental shift? And it will either be a monumental shift towards a, I don't know, Russian, Chinese centric world, a monumental shift towards extremism, a monumental shift towards chaos, or it could be a monumental shift where America seized an opportunity and led the charge of freedom around the globe. One of the verses of the Star-Spangled Banner actually has a great line that unfortunately doesn't get said very much. It's, "Oh, conquer we must when our cause it is just." And that's something that I think we ought not to forget. And one other thing I want to chat with you about. You mentioned that this administration has reestablished credibility around the globe. Reestablish credibility around the globe. I'd like to I'll give you an opportunity to elaborate on that, sir.
I'm tempted to try to cover the waterfront as you have, Congressman. There's obviously a rich discussion to be had.
Yeah, unfortunately, I control the time, though. So just if you could go on with reestablishing credibility, that's what I'm curious about.
Well, I'll just give you one example, which is that this administration made the decision to become much more active in the international arenas of the United Nations, the UN Human Rights Council, the OSCE, where we've come to play a leadership role, galvanizing these international mechanisms to articulate and enhance the norms that reflect our values: freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of religion. And there's a number of ways in which we have led the international community in these venues to step up and agree with our propositions that these fundamental international human rights are the international system's standards. So that happens through patient diplomacy, engaging with a wide range of countries, and we have the credibility to do that. We lead these discussions, and we often get them to a good result. Not 100% of the time, but often when we engage, we succeed.
Unfortunately, though, sometimes if you don't back that with strength and, saying, as was mentioned earlier by Mr. Weber, talking about a red line, I've said before, if you're in a crowded theater, and the only way to empty that crowded theater is if you yell the word red line, don't do it, because it has a very powerful meaning if you're president of the United States. Sir, with that, I'll yield back. I want to say I do respect your work for your country, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kinzinger.